Și acum vă provoc din nou la un alt tip de rundă de aplauze ca să-i demonstrăm lui Cristi că putem să respectăm împreună o regulă. Și atunci vă invit să aplaudăm, dar într-un fel în care la final să ne oprim toți în același timp. Încercăm? Hai să facem o probă. Mărturisesc că știu exercițiul dintr-o anumită organizație studențească, nu să-i dau numele ca să nu fie promovare. Deci, asta era de probă. Acum mai facem o dată, dar e ultima tură ca să vedem dacă se mai aude vreun sunet după ultima rundă de aplauze. Excelent, mulțumesc frumos. Cristi, e bine? Nu știu dacă mai ai microfon acum. E bine.
Toți s-au oprit în același moment.
Excelent. Am respectat cercul, apropo de regulă. Mulțumim frumos încă o dată, Cristi. Mulțumim și vouă pentru exercițiu. Următorul moment, până să introducem invitatul despre care o să vă spun imediat, sunteți de fapt tot voi, pentru că, deși de data asta nu o să vă invităm pe scenă de-a binelea să vă ridicați de pe scaune, ci o să rog echipa tehnică să ne arate câteva imagini cu voi, surprinse de Vlad Eftenie. Vă spuneam înainte de masa de prânz, Vlad este fotograf cunoscut, poate că îl cunoașteți deja din Facebook, cu siguranță i-ați dat un like. De asemenea, Vlad lucrează și în zona de educație. Așa, și Vlad îmi aduce o hârtie. Sperăm că scaunele au supraviețuit, dar mai ales persoanele.
Eu făcut poze.
Așa, mulțumesc frumos. Să știți că înainte de masa de prânz spuneam că este Vlad și echipa lui și tocmai am primit pe surse, ca să zic așa, am primit numele oamenilor din echipa lui Vlad. Mulțumesc frumos, Vlad. Este vorba de Oana Petrescu, Oana Moga, Sandu Marin, Sandu Ioana, Eli Driv. Dacă cumva am greșit numele, vin Paștile, pot să vin cu un cadou. Și bineînțeles Vlad. O rundă de aplauze vă rog pentru echipa lui Vlad și pentru Vlad. Ca să fie un pic interactiv, o să facem seria aceasta de fotografii, o să le facem probabil în 2 sau în 3 reprize între discursuri. Mulțumesc frumos! Dar ca să fie și un pic interactiv, o să vă invit ca atunci când vă recunoașteți chipul, chiar dacă poate sunteți mai mulți în fotografie, să produceți un sunet. Dintr-o întâmplare puteți să spuneți big. Dintr-o întâmplare. Facem o probă? Să vedem? Big! Excelent! Nu e nimeni în sală, înțeleg? Niciun big? Nici acum? Cu curaj! Acum ne putem depersonaliza, dacă e altcineva în imagine. Big! Big, big? Big, 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 big. Dacă am fi mai mulți în fotografii, ar fi și mai... Big! S-a auzit? Stați așa, că mai facem un pic și suna bingo. Deci e... Big? Vlad și echipa lui au surprins aceste momente. Desigur că și după conferință o să aveți ocazia să le urmăriți. Asta chiar dacă n-am vorbit big, 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 avem big, big la pătrat sau la 2, mă rog, nu la pătrat. Aici avem și un zâmbet între 2 persoane, excelent. Să zicem că aici lucrurile sunt de îndreptat, ca să zic așa. Sau poate nu. Big, big. Unde avem? Unde avem? Big, big, big. Așa. Să mai urmărim câteva cadre. Avem cu toții, ia să vedem, facem așa, Mark Zuckerberg probabil că ar fi încântat că facem acest sondaj. Mâna sus și ne are cont de Facebook. Ce simplu a fost. Pentru cine nu are cont de Facebook, vă reamintim că suntem în 2015. Glumesc, e în regulă dacă nu aveți cont de Facebook. Vă întrebam acest lucru pentru că probabil colegii mei o să posteze aceste fotografii și în online și le puteți urmări. Și bineînțeles, un alt calup de imagini o să avem între următoarele 2 discursuri. Așa că rog echipa tehnică momentan să ne oprim din fotografii. Nu înainte să mai dau o rundă de aplauze pentru echipa lui Vlad și bineînțeles pentru voi. spuneam și pentru voi, pentru că voi sunteți de fapt eroii sau personajele cele mai importante astăzi alături de invitații de pe scenă. Ca să pot să îl introduc pe următorul, să-l invit alături de noi pe următorul invitat, o să vă rog să-mi dați voie să vă citesc un citat al unui personaj foarte drag mie. Acum câțiva ani am petrecut câteva luni în India și atunci aveam un prieten de bere pe numele lui Gandhi. Și Gandhi spune așa: "There are 7 things that will destroy us. Wealth without work, pleasure without consequence, knowledge without character, religion without sacrifice, politics without principles, science without humanity, and business without ethics." Și m-am gândit că poate această formulă, că nu e neapărat un citat, o să ne ajute să ne uităm din mai multe perspective la aceste domenii. Următorul invitat ne va vorbi cel mai probabil de legătura între caracter, leadership și integritate și îmi face mare, mare plăcere să îl invit alături de noi pe un om care vine de foarte departe, credeți-mă, de fapt putem să-l și întrebăm de unde ajunge sau să ne spună. Și o să vă rog în aplauzele voastre, Todd Geist, Associate Director of Finance, Procter & Gamble Company. Please welcome Todd. Welcome.
Thank you. Got it?
Yeah.
Hey, there we go. Before I couldn't even hear myself. Now I can. Well, it's great to be with you here this afternoon. And sorry, I'm going to probably walk around a little bit more than the previous speaker. This is my third trip to Bucharest, so I'm happy to have returned a few times now. And I have to say that each time I've come, I've enjoyed my visit, and I learned something new about the city. And this time was my first opportunity to experience rush hour traffic. So I'm officially on board with Bucharest now. I think I stayed maybe 10 kilometers from here, and it took about an hour and a half this morning to travel. So yes, that was my official welcome. So now it is nice to be here, and especially on the topic that we have. When Cristi told me about the overall theme of integrity and leadership, I thought that is just perfect for me because that is a topic that I am very passionate about. So I look forward to sharing with you on that topic today. Apologies in advance, we don't have a monitor, so I'm going to have to look over my shoulder on occasion here. So our topic today is, for the next couple of hours, will be leadership for success. And I like to really emphasize to people up front that this is not just a typical quote-unquote leadership seminar, because we all know that leadership is extremely important, but leadership itself is not our goal, is it? Leadership is something that we use as a means to reach an end, and that end is success. So today we're going to talk a lot about leadership, but we'll also talk about this concept of success, which is our ultimate destination. And one of the things we'll touch on along the way is, what is success, right? All of us could define that very differently, so we'll spend a few minutes on that topic today as well. So leadership for success. The objective today is a couple of things. First of all, we do want to, Steve and I, as we share on this topic of leadership for success, we want to help you gain some additional head knowledge. That's where it's going to start. We want to maybe provoke your thinking a little bit, share some insights that maybe you haven't heard before. But I want to be clear that if that's all we do today is fill your head with a little more knowledge, we have not met with success in our time together. Because what I really want to do is make sure that you're being equipped with some ideas on specific behaviors you can take with you to begin to practice leadership more effectively, more successfully tomorrow. We're going to give you tonight off, okay? It's been a long day. But tomorrow morning, we want to dive right into practicing those new behaviors. If you do have questions along the way, I think we have time. If you want to Actually, if you raise your hands, the lights are kind of bright. I may not see you, but just shout out if you have a question you'd like clarified. We've divided this information that we're going to share into 3 sections. The first is the foundation of leadership. We'll do some introductions, then the foundation of leadership. The second section will be talking about some specific actions that leaders do. And then in the third section, Steve's going to come back and talk about a practical application of some of that leadership material in the teamwork context. So most of you, I'm sure, at the point in life that you're at, maybe you're not in any great organizational leadership position, but all of us at any point in life are involved in some kind of team. And that's where we really get a chance to exercise those leadership muscles for the first time. So Steve will talk about that. Let me first introduce my family. I know it was introduced briefly before, but let me make it more personal, okay? This is my gang that I left at home, my wife, Shauna, and I have 2 children who are young teenagers, Brendan and Alyssa. And I am from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the U.S., originally from Pennsylvania, but have lived in Cincinnati for many years. I am a finance manager at the Procter & Gamble company and have been now for very nearly 29 years. But one thing I'd like to make clear is that as I'm here with you today, I'm going to certainly share with you from my experience at Procter & Gamble. It has made me the leader that I am today, much of my experience with that company over the years. But I'm not here as an official company representative. I'm not a company spokesman in any way. I was actually in the P&G office earlier today. That was business. But as I'm here with you, this is really more of a volunteer effort for me, so I want to be clear about that. One other thing I thought I would share up front, just so you understand, is that I actually spent a year of my life not in Romania, but seeing it almost every day, because I was living in Vidin, Bulgaria. Do you know where Vidin is? Yeah, some of you. It's right on the Danube River over by, past Craiova, over by Calafat. So we saw Romania from afar across the Danube every day. And though I'm not that familiar with Romania, having visited only a few times, I feel reasonably familiar by this time with some of the characteristics of the overall region. So my family spent a year there doing some volunteer work, partly at a church, but it was a small church. There wasn't that much work to do. My main work was actually with the high school, teaching on various topics there. So real quickly on interests, I love travel. Maybe that's what brought me here in part. And I also love hiking. Any hiking enthusiasts in the crowd? Hey, all right, let's talk at the break, okay? We'll put a plan together. This is actually my wife and I at the top of a ridge in Norway last summer on a vacation. So it was a great way to combine those 2 interests. I also am very interested and involved in the Christian faith. I'm very involved in my church back in Cincinnati, and I love sports, whether it's our football or your football, or basketball, or you name it. I probably like it. Okay. So Steve spoke to you earlier today. We're not going to have him come up just this moment. I know he introduced himself before, but you may not have had a chance to see a picture of what he calls his tribe. So this is it. Steve has 3 kids and 14 grandkids, and I think every one of them is represented here, so that's his family. Before I go on, I do want to take a moment just to do one last introduction of sorts, and that is, since I'll be sharing some examples from my experience at P&G, let me just introduce the company to you very quickly. So P&G is, as you probably know, one of the bigger corporations in the world, certainly the biggest in its industry, $80+ billion in sales, $12+ billion in profits, 5 billion consumers in the world, and of course, I sincerely hope that you are counted in that 5 billion somewhere. So it's certainly a company that is widespread, but if you know anything about the Procter & Gamble company, you know that the company is not just about the numbers, it's about what? The brands. So anyone know some Procter & Gamble brands? Shout them out. Gillette, good. Pampers. We all can identify with Pampers. Any others? No, not Johnson & Johnson. That's the competition. Any more of those and that could ruin my day. No, shout them out. Was there another? Head and Shoulders, good. Pantene, Always for the ladies, Tide and Ariel, quite a number of products in different consumable categories. But those brands aren't necessarily what bring me here either. One of the things about our company that really brings me here today, that I really take a lot of pride in as a P&G employee, is that P&G has been rated now I think 3 consecutive years by a leading magazine in the US, CEO magazine, as one of the companies, well, not one of, but the company in the world that is best at developing leaders. And with P&G, that's not just a passing interest developing leaders. It's not just something we do because it sounds like a good thing to do for recruiting purposes or something like that. We do it because we have a long philosophy over many years of hiring people at entry level right off of university campuses and then developing them throughout their career to be the leaders of our company in the future. So if we're not successful at developing leaders, doesn't look good for us long term. We're not going to recruit that talent at an executive level outside of the company. Okay, so that's a little bit about P&G. With that, I want to move on and talk about, very preliminarily, about the concept of leadership. And what better place to start than our old friend, the dictionary, to see what it has to say. So here's what the dictionary says about leadership. Someone who goes before or with to show the way, or someone who guides others in a direction or action. So you'd listen to that and you'd say, yep, got it. That's nothing too profound there. You're thinking, I hope it gets better than this. But let me explain to you why I start there. Far more important than what you see on that page that talks about leadership is what you don't see on that page. Nowhere on that slide do you see anything that says that the leader is the person who is in the top box on the organization chart for the organization. It says nothing like that. It doesn't say the leader is the one with that fancy $1 million title that has chief in front of it, or president or something like that. It has nothing to do with the title. And it doesn't even say up there anywhere that the person who is the leader is the person who has their face on the currency of whatever country you might be in. That's not what it says about leadership. In fact, a better way to answer the question, who can be a leader, is to take a look into that mirror, if you can even tell it's a mirror, and use your imagination a little bit. And if you try to answer the question, who should practice leadership, what should you say? You're looking at them, right? All of us can practice leadership. And certainly the P&G company and for myself personally, I'm a strong advocate of this idea that leaders are not born. Sure, they may be equipped, some may be equipped better naturally than others, but leaders really can be developed over the course of time. And whether you're the chief executive of a company with tremendous scope and scale and influence over thousands of people, or whether you're a person who works doing cleaning in a factory on the night shift somewhere in a remote location, there are opportunities for you to lead. The scale and magnitude will differ, but we fundamentally believe that those opportunities to lead wherever you are, whether you're in university or in one of these other contexts, those opportunities are there. I want to share a couple of quick points about why do we need leadership. This is an American business leader from many years ago in the 20th century. Firestone said, "The growth and development of people is the highest calling of leadership." And I think in a lot of ways that summarizes my personal philosophy of leadership. And it really leads you to the conclusion that having an organization grow and be healthy and survive over the long term, organizational survival, is really dependent upon having strong leadership. But here's another piece of perspective I thought would be especially relevant to you. This is a few years old now. I actually found this Reuters article when I was in Vidin, living for that year, and it really reached out and caught my attention. The collapse of communism may have changed the face of Eastern Europe, but the region remains troubled by corruption and poor governance, lacking the strong institutions and leaders essential to a healthy society. And I went on to read that article, and it was talking about some of the countries that are in this area. Does that sound familiar to you all? Yeah, I thought so. And honestly, in the year that I was in Vid in Bulgaria, I was certainly internalizing the truth of that statement. So I just want to connect with you on this point as well, that why do we need leadership? One of the reasons we need leadership is not so we can have corporations last for a long period of time. This isn't all about corporations. It's so that our societies themselves can be healthy and can not just survive, but really thrive over the long term. With that in mind, a quick trivia question for you. How many years do you think the Procter & Gamble company has been in existence? What would you guess? 50 years? 100. Okay. 70? Going once? Going twice? Any other bids? All right. It actually has been around for 178 years. So it's a company that really has been around longer than most in the United States, only something over 200 years in its existence. And I do think that's a tribute to some of the strong leadership that the company has had over that period of time. And it's important to point out that really has enabled the company not only to survive, but to thrive. After all these years, it's not just existing, it's a company that's still very much on the top. So with that, let's continue on, and I want to start on this topic of the fundamentals of leadership. And I like to use an illustration of a house, a very simple illustration to get this started. If you were going out to build a house, what would be the very first thing you would build? The foundation. And if you're out to build a leader, if you're out to develop yourself as a leader, I would contend that the place you need to start is the same. It's the foundation. And so I would suggest today that this concept of leadership character, we might say integrity in leadership, is a critical foundation for leaders. I've had over the years in my career, I've had people who have come up to me and said, Todd, I understand that being an effective leader is important for my long-term success. You've been with the company for many years, and I really would appreciate you telling me, what do you see in me that I could do differently? What can I do differently in order to be a successful leader? And the way I typically respond to that question is far more important than what you need to do to be a leader is who you need to be. The who you are part of leadership really is the starting point, the foundation of leadership. So that's why we're going to start with that topic today. After we do that, we're going to move on, and I'm going to share with you a model for thinking about the actions that leaders take. I'm actually going to share, there's 5 points in the model. I'm going to share a couple, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back later after the break, and I believe another speaker, and we'll finish that up. All right, so let's start with the discussion on leadership character. As we do, I have this question for you. Many of you have been here throughout the day. I know this topic has come up more than once, so what is character? You should be well equipped to answer this question now. What do you think? What is character?
All the values and the skills that build you up as a person.
Values certainly plays a big role in it. Good. Yeah, good. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the way I like to think about it, is character is, if you all didn't hear that, character is who you are when no one's watching. So I want you to be thinking about that today as we go through some of this material and some of these elements of some of the virtues and values associated with character. Just be thinking to yourself, so who am I when no one is watching? Am I some of these characteristics at that point in time? When I think about leadership character, to me it starts with a clear sense of purpose. That really is the heart of the matter. And in addition to that, I would include these 5 characteristics or virtues that are wrapped around the circle. So we'll go through each of these in a moment, but let's start at the very top with courage, and then next is respect for others, integrity, humility, and self-discipline. So first, on the center of the circle that we had, clear sense of purpose. This is a quote that says it far better than I ever could. And it's from an American author by the name of Rick Warren. Anybody heard of Rick Warren? A couple. Good. Rick is an author who wrote the book, The Purpose-Driven Life. And in that book, he said, "Without a purpose, life is motion without meaning, activity without direction, and events without reason. Without a purpose, life is petty, trivial, and pointless." Anybody want to sign up for such a life? I don't think so, right? I think he really nails it perfectly with that statement, that we're really just going to be blowing in the wind if we don't really have a very clear sense of purpose as our anchor. So a sense of purpose means such things as this. Sometimes it can be hard to understand, but it would be knowing what's important to you, knowing what you believe, knowing what you stand for. I have a few other comments up here that may help you think about this more clearly. Maybe what is your number one motivation? What is a long-term, most important long-term goal that you might have? And fundamentally, I would suggest that a way to think about this is, how do you define success? So we talked about leadership for success. How do you define that? What are you going to use your leadership in order to achieve? So that's really, when you think about having strong character, really understanding that definition of success and having people around you who may be following you know that is a critical part of leadership. And lastly, having an internal versus an external motivation. So what is a classic example of an external motivation? Money, right? Or maybe power or fame or something like this. Those are all external motivation. Internal motivation, by contrast, is something that comes from deep within, something that might be a conviction about a difference that you want to make in the world. What will your contribution be? For people of faith, it might be, what is it that you believe God would have you do during your time walking this earth? So those are people who have this clear sense of purpose, or people who have this, generally a strong internal motivation. They're not chasing in different directions after different external motivators. All right, so that was the heart of the matter. Now we're going to go around the circle that I showed you. And the first item on the first characteristic on the circle is this concept of courage. And I heard, through translation, I heard some of the questions that you were asking before. One of them, I think, was, what's a value that's especially important to you? And there's a couple that I would call out here, but this is one of them. And this is something that I have only evolved into in recent years as I've begun to really understand the importance of courage. So courage, what is it, first of all? Courage is acting when times are tough. And that is regardless of personal or political implications. So that's what courage is all about. And I think all of us, as we think about whether it's government leaders or some corporate leaders, we certainly see examples in our society today where we don't see as much courage as we would hope to see. So as we think about developing our own leadership capability, keep this one in mind. Here's one of the reasons why. Winston Churchill made a quote. He said, "Courage is the first of human qualities because it is the one that guarantees all others." So think about it. Remember, some of the other items that I had on that visual were integrity. So do you think integrity is really going to stand in the face of the toughest tests if you don't have courage? No, not going to happen. Do you think when the winds are blowing in a direction that would suggest that respect for others, maybe a certain class of people or a certain ethnicity or whatever it might be, when the winds are blowing in a direction that suggests don't respect those others, it takes strong courage to stand in the face of those prevailing winds and to respect others. So I like to start this discussion around these virtues with this topic of courage because it really is the foundation. If you don't have this, those other virtues won't be there when the pressure is on. I heard another quote one time by an American congresswoman from years ago. She said, "Courage is the virtue on which it's the ladder, you know ladders? Courage is the ladder on which other virtues mount." And I thought, that's a great word picture to describe how to think about courage. Next on our list was respect. This is simple to say, sometimes hard to do, right? So it's listening to others, really caring with empathy about what others have to say. It's not caring for others necessarily. It's not taking care of them, I should say, but it's just showing care in your interactions with them. And accepting others' differences. That's a high priority with P&G, is really valuing the differences that different people bring. Next is this idea of integrity, which I know you've talked at length today. So one way to say that is someone who's known for deep honesty. It's someone who knows right from wrong and does the right thing. So picking up on the point we had before about character, if character is who you are when no one is watching, integrity, you might explain integrity as being the same person whether or not someone is watching. So ask yourself, am I the same person when I'm in a public situation as I am in a private? Am I the same person with my family as I am with my university or work colleagues? So doing the right thing and knowing right from wrong, again, sounds easy enough, right? But let me pose this question to you. Who decides what is right and wrong? And how? Who decides? Let's start with that. Who decides what is right and wrong? Everyone decides for themselves? Okay. Any other ideas? Any points of view? The conditions? Your conscience. Okay, maybe a high institution. Good. Any other ideas?
I think there should be a difference between what you think right now and what could be evaluated later, because you might think you do the right thing and after all it's totally better.
That never happens, does it? Yeah, good. Well, thanks for sharing your points of view. Very often when I engage groups on this topic, what people will say is, it's personal. I think we all need to decide for ourselves what is right and wrong. And that sounds right on the surface, doesn't it? But think about that a little bit more deeply. Most of us, what we're saying is that I would like to decide for myself what is right and wrong. But think about what society would look like. Maybe Cristi, if he's still here, our previous speaker, could add perspective on this as well. What would society look like if everybody out there decided for themselves what was right and wrong and acted upon it? What would that look like? It would look like not just chaos, it would look like mass chaos, wouldn't it? And people like Cristi would probably have much more business, much more activity in their area. So it's interesting when you think about that. I really want to provoke your thinking there, because it's easy for us to think, I'd like to decide for myself. I'm an adult. I can do that based on my conscience. But if you really think about what that would look like if it played out across society, that's a pretty scary proposition. And I just wanted to share with you the approach that I use, in case you'll find it helpful. And I want to be clear, I'm not speaking for the Procter & Gamble company on this point, for sure. I'm speaking based on my own life experience and views on such things. But I find two things. I find that if you have a source of defining right and wrong that is outside of yourself, it can be a better place to be. And use an authoritative source. So I told you I believe in God. I believe God's Word is the Bible. The Bible has the 10 Commandments, right? You know the 10 Commandments. And it has a lot of other moral teaching as well. And it's, even though those 10 Commandments were written more than 3,000 years ago, have a look at them, and you'll find that they really do speak to where we are today. They're just as relevant as moral principles today as they were when they were written. And here's one other really important part of that. Let's say I'm the leader, okay? You're the followers. We're a big organization. I'm in charge. And yesterday, I'm confronted with a moral, ethical situation in our line of work, and I make a certain decision on that. I decide a certain path to go, okay? Today, I'm confronted, that was yesterday. Today, I'm confronted with a very similar ethical decision, but the conditions are a little different on this one. The environment's different. The visibility of the decision might be different. And so today, I'm going to decide differently how I would define right and wrong. What would you expect from me tomorrow when the next moral dilemma or ethical issue came up? What would you expect from me? You wouldn't know what to expect, would you? You know, if I'm looking at similar decisions and I'm deciding differently on those, it can really be tough to know what to predict that the leader is going to do. And so I want to turn that back to you as leaders now and into the future. Be aware that if you don't have a consistent definition that you really stick with, you're going to have people who are following you who are a bit lost. They won't know what to expect from you, and that will make following you and really trusting you a challenge. Okay, last one here is this concept of humility. Usually when we talk about leadership, we talk about the confidence side of the equation. And that's important, critically important. But don't forget to temper that with a dose of humility. Sometimes confidence leads to arrogance, and my strong suggestion is that leadership character is going to be stronger with a dose of humility, which links back to our concept of respect for others. It will make you more likely to listen to what other people have to say. Okay. So remember, we're taking a trip around our circle, and the last virtue that we have here is this idea of self-discipline. Self-discipline is doing what needs to be done when it needs to be done, even when you don't want to do it. And let me take you back to courage for a moment. Remember, I was suggesting to you that nothing ever really gets started without having courage. Courage is often the starting point. In the same way, I would contend that nothing ever really gets finished unless you have self-discipline. So I'm finishing with this one very purposefully to convey that message. Here's a quick quote. Theodore Roosevelt, former U.S. president, "With self-discipline, most anything is possible." This is a very powerful virtue. Okay, so we've taken a trip through various aspects of leadership character. And we've touched on a number of different concepts here, but I want to take a moment now to converge a bit and to suggest to you that there's one key theme that brings all of these concepts together, something that really knits all of these different concepts into one. And that theme would be trust. Leaders with strong character gain trust, and leaders who are trusted are followed. It's that simple. So, question for you all. How many of you would willingly, emphasis on willingly, follow someone that you didn't trust? That you did not trust? I had one temporary hand because I didn't say it very clearly, sorry. How many would willingly follow someone you did not trust? None of us would do that, right? We all know that. But what we don't think is we need to turn that around and look at it the other way and ask ourselves, why would we ever expect anyone else to trust, to follow us if they didn't trust us, if we weren't a very trustworthy person who showed these kind of characteristics that I'm talking about? So trust is really the goal that we're seeking here. I don't know if you've seen this quote before, but it sums it up better than I could ever say it. It's from Alfred Adler, Austrian psychologist from many years ago. Adler said, "Men of genius are admired, men of wealth are envied, men of power are feared, but only men and women of character are trusted." And I think that's, in a few short words, that captures much of the point I was trying to make to you here. If you are not a person of character, really think about who you are when no one's watching, and think about, how are you in and out of the view of others, and ask yourself, am I the kind of person who has the type of character that will make me trusted? If not, that's something to work on. With that said, I want to be clear. I do not stand before you today as the person who is the king of character, so to speak. I mean, developing character is a journey, right? And so I don't want to stand up here and act like something I'm not. We all have a journey, and I just want to encourage you as you leave here today to be working on this path of growing in your leadership character. So, by way of a quick review, we've talked about being a leader is knowing who you are, what's important to you, what's not. When those challenging decisions come, you know which path to take, which path to avoid, and you know why you're making that choice. In a way, you could think about it as having a personal mission statement. Maybe you've heard that phrase before. And sometimes, well, let me show you a couple of examples of what that could look like. One is Mahatma Gandhi. You all know of Gandhi, Indian spiritual political leader from the last century. Gandhi had these principles that he lived by. This is, you might say, back to our starting point today, you might say this is how he defined success in his life. He said, "Let the first act of every morning to be to make the following resolve for the day. I shall not fear anyone on earth. I shall fear only God. I shall not bear ill toward anyone. I shall not submit to injustice to anyone." And now he starts to really draw the line emphatically. "I shall conquer untruth by truth, and in resisting untruth, I shall put up with all suffering." So that, for him, that's what success looked like, really standing for the truth and taking a stand with courage, even if that meant some suffering was coming. So that's Gandhi's view. Here's perspective from another U.S. president, Thomas Jefferson. I won't read all of these, but the first one, never put off to tomorrow what you can do for today. Never put off to tomorrow what you can today. Never, ever drop your slide clicker in the middle of a presentation. Unless you have expert technical resources, I hope, to help me.
We'll search for another one.
Okay. I think it just needs the battery.
I may help you.
I think it's fine.
We'll find a solution. Yes, it's working.
Yeah, good. So I like the third one here, which has an interesting application to today's United States of America. Never spend your money before you have it. So somehow over the years we, as a country, have more than lost sight of that virtue, unfortunately. I love number 7 here. Give so much time improving yourself that you have no time to criticize others. So this is a list of principles that Jefferson stood by, and it was his way of defining success. So I'd like you to be thinking about a personal mission statement for yourself. In the amount of time that we have today, I'm not going to set aside time for you to work on it, but I'd like you maybe to just make a note to yourself to be thinking, just picking up on what we've been talking about here. What do I stand for? How do I define success? What is my purpose? and also this other aspect of what are my priorities. Sometimes it's easier, by the way, to start thinking about what are my priorities, what are things that are really important to me, and then as you develop that, it can give some insights into how you think about what your purpose is. So at the end of our full session today, we'll spend a few minutes trying to wrap up and encouraging you to think about some next steps. But that is maybe first among the next steps. No kidding, group. Leadership character is the foundation of leadership. And if you think about what leadership character consists of, having a clear sense of purpose is the starting point. So if you're serious about really growing in this area, and I know you are, or you wouldn't be here today, I highly encourage you to spend some time thinking through that. Okay? So I'm going to move on now to our second topic, which is perspective on some leadership actions. But before I do that, any questions about what we've talked about so far? I probably should have asked this before, but are you understanding me okay? Yeah? All right. Nice time to ask after I've been speaking for 40 minutes, right? All right. Well, Steve and I are glad to answer any questions you have. So if you don't want to speak up now, just make a note, and maybe we can talk at a break or at the end of the session later.
You can use also Bulgarian language. I don't know if we have someone that knows Bulgarian. Do you know some words in Bulgarian?
Malcolm.
No. Then switch to Romanian. If someone would like to ask in Romanian, we'll try to translate in English if it's simple for you. If not, we can write down the questions and to the next session.
Sounds good. So when you asked me the question, did I understand Bulgarian, I could have done this or I could have done this, and you would have had no idea whether it was the American nod or the Bulgarian, right? All right. Before I continue then, I do just want to say that really for Steve and I, coming this long distance, we really are passionate about this topic. That's part of what brings us here. But part of what brings us here is the opportunity just to really engage with you, to get to know you a bit, and to personalize this a bit, and to help you on your journey. It really impresses me that you all are here. You're setting aside your time, and remember I was talking about internal motivation a while ago? I want to compliment you on your internal motivation. It tells me that you're well down that path, or you wouldn't be here today. So way to go, and anything that we can do to help you on that journey, we're very, very happy to do. Okay, so let's move on. We're going to talk now about some specific leadership actions. And before I start down the path, I just want to share a reflection from early in my career. I recall early on as I started with the company that it was clear to me that I needed to be a strong leader. I needed to be an effective leader if I was going to have a successful career. It was very obvious to me I needed to do that. But if at the end of a long week, I would reflect back on the week and I would ask myself the question, was I an effective leader in this past week? I could never answer a question like that. I mean, you know that leadership is a very broad topic that covers a lot of ground. And when you ask the question that way of yourself, am I an effective leader? It's about impossible to answer it clearly and in a helpful way. But what I am going to share with you now, 5 actions of a leader, are fairly comprehensive in covering the content you need from beginning to end to be an effective leader. And the beauty of these is, if you ask yourself at the end of a long week, have I done this one of the 5 or this one of the 5, you'll find that you can answer that question. And you can begin to understand, okay, I do these couple pretty well, these couple I need to work on. So I think this really breaks it down to something that you can act upon. I know, honestly, over my career, over these many years, it's been a huge help to me to think about it this way, and I hope you'll find the same to be true. Here they are. And you can see on the left-hand side that it spells out the word in English, leads. And the concepts, the principles are this. A leader is one who lays out a vision. You might say that's the concept of the visionary. Second is someone who engages others, the collaborator. A is adding capability. That might be the equipper. D is someone who drives motivation. You might think of this as the inspirer role that the leader plays. And then number 5 is the concept of staying the course. This is the manager aspect of being a leader. And this is the one where you might characterize this as executing with excellence. It's that part of leadership. Okay? So these are the 5 actions. I'm going to go through 3 of them now, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and pick up the other 2 later. So, laying out a vision, the visionary leader. This is usually a pretty easy one to give examples. So help me. Who are some examples you can think of visionary leaders? Mm-hmm. No, Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela. Others? These people are usually pretty visible. Yeah, Tesla, good. Didn't hear that one. Hitler. Okay, I can't deny that. He did have a vision. Now this character thing we were talking about might have been some deficiencies in that area, but he had a vision, didn't he? Yeah, good. Well, let me share some additional examples with you. I'll share some quotes. John F. Kennedy, and this was 1961. You've heard these words, I'm sure, but this was 1961. I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth. So I think the astronauts were especially glad to hear what came after the "and" there, right? The real accomplishment wasn't getting them there, it was getting them back. So he said these words in 61. In 63, of course, he was assassinated, but in 69, the man actually did indeed walk on the moon. And when you think about, Steve was telling me the other day that the technology associated with, what was the word? The memory
of the spacecraft to the moon is equal to 6 digital pictures on your camera.
Did you hear that? So the memory of that technology at the time was equivalent to 6 pictures, the 6 pictures you took today on your iPhone or whatever it might be. So think about the power of that vision in mobilizing a country and many resources to actually accomplish the vision. Martin Luther King, of course, you mentioned him. He's the one that we always think of in this capacity. And even though this one is so well understood, I just want to take a moment to re-emphasize it. Think about in 1963, think about where the United States was as a country. At that point, if black men and women had to use public restrooms, or if they wanted a drinking fountain, they couldn't go to the typical one that was available in the public situation. They had to go find one that was exclusively for them. And if they wanted to ride the bus, they were at the back of the bus, right? So it was a society at that time in 63 which was very discriminatory towards African descent people. But in the face of that, he stood up, I would suggest with amazing courage. He stood up and he proclaimed these words that we all know. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they're not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And I think it is no less than amazing that in 2008, our country went from, in a period of 45 years, that happens to be within my lifetime, just barely, but it happens to be within my lifetime, that our country went from not even allowing black Americans to use the same public facilities to literally having Barack Obama, the first black American man in the highest office in the land. So I don't want to over-dramatize that, nor do I want to suggest that I agree with everything that Mr. Obama has done since then, but think about that, right? I mean, that is a really powerful transformation in a society over the course of 45 years. I think one of the most transformative examples of a vision that I know of. You know this man? So it's Stefan Chelmare, right? All right. So I have to tell you, on the way over here, I was coming from the P&G office, and I was taking a last look at my slides, and I saw this one, and I thought, I really want to make sure I pronounce this right. So I asked the taxi driver, how do you pronounce this? Stefan Chelmare? And he says, yes. And he says, in fact, that's the road we're on right now. So I came to you today by way of Stefan Chelmare Boulevard, or whatever it is. So anyway, he had obviously a great visionary in his own right. Moldova is not mine, it is not yours, it belongs to your children's and to your children's children. So he had a very forward-looking vision in thinking about the country. So anytime you have a leadership discussion, the two words Steve Jobs can be prominent, right? So we'll mention him a couple times today. This time, I'm going to share a quote from Jobs, and it's one I doubt you've heard before, but it has an especially important point that I want to emphasize. He said, creativity is just connecting things. Just connecting things. When you ask creative people how they did something, they feel a little guilty because they didn't really do it. They just saw something, they connected the experiences, and they synthesized things. He makes that sound so simple, doesn't he? The founder and leader of arguably the world's most innovative corporation, it's just simple. Just connecting and synthesizing. So we'll come back to that in a moment. First, I want to talk down through some other specific aspects of being a visionary. What does a visionary do? Here's a couple thoughts. First, it's someone who uses external focus. So, in simple terms, a person who is a leader is not focused on what's happening in the room. It's a person who's focused on what's happening outside. In the corporate context, it's not someone focused on their own corporation and their own organizational issues, but it's someone who's focused on things outside the room. And not only seeing what's going on outside in trends and such, but it's understanding what is driving that. What are the root causes that are making the things happen that are happening out there? So that's one aspect of a visionary leader, is someone who uses that external focus. For major corporations like P&G, that can be things like understanding environmental trends in the world we live in, certainly understanding technology trends, things of that nature. So we spend a lot of time making sure that we keep those front and center so that we can have a strong vision for our future. One other example that I would share with you actually comes from my time in Vidin, because this was really vivid to me as a business person. So in Vidin, when I moved there in 2009, the only place you could buy food for your home was the little food stores. Right? You might have to go to 2 or 3 small food stores in a town like that in order to get everything that you needed. And then one day, after I was there for a few months, the big bulldozers came out and started clearing some land. And the next thing you know, we got word that a Kaufland store was coming. Do you know Kaufland? Yeah, they're here too? Yeah. So the difference between these tiny little food stores and the massive Kaufland store, as you know, is just enormous. And I remember thinking to myself, as a business person, I hope those people who own the small food stores right next door to where Kaufland is going to build that store, I hope they're rethinking their plans for the future. I hope they're really, I hope they knew this store was coming, and I hope they're really thinking about what they're going to do next as a vision for the future. You all know better than I do. I'm sure you have many of those same little food stores. And they can survive. They can thrive, even in the face of the big corporate stores. But they certainly need to be rethinking their strategy and rethinking their vision, don't they? Okay, so next up is a visionary is someone who changes the game. And importantly, they change the game even when they're already winning the current game. So, a couple of examples that I would share. Maybe you have some that you could share as well. To me, the classic examples here of a company that was not willing to change the game that they were winning is the Kodak company, right? Kodak company made billions of dollars selling film for all those years. For decades, they made tons of money selling film. They knew digital technology was coming. They knew, they had to sense that that was going to be the way of the future. But they made all this money selling film, and they were unable to lead the change to digital photography. Of course, they tried to follow. They developed their own Kodak cameras for a while. But a company like that needs to be leading the change in the rules to the game, even when they're winning. And they didn't. They missed the opportunity. Another example of someone who did that pretty well, of course, is Apple. So you think about, maybe 12 or more years ago, Apple introduced the iPod, right? So the little sound device. And they made their billions of dollars in a short period of time. Everybody had their iPod. And at that point, they were working on an iPhone. And they knew, like we would expect, if they introduced an iPhone that had MP3 capability, what's going to happen to the iPod? It's going to decline, right? That's not where the big business opportunity is in the future. But of course, they did the right thing. They knew that they had a vision there was far greater success and profits in this iPhone, even if the iPod gets minimized somewhat. And so they made a courageous decision to sacrifice this cash cow, we might call it, sacrifice this huge moneymaker, and to move in a different direction. So can you think of any other examples of companies that have made the tough decision to change the rules of the game? Huh?
Nintendo with video games.
Yeah, good. In what way for IBM? Services. Yep, totally transformed. Good. All right, so there's a number of other examples on both sides of this one, but I just want to encourage you as you think about leading, don't lead in the box. Really think about what needs to happen outside of the box. Don't be constrained by today's product or service. Next is balancing creativity and reapplication. And I like to make this point by starting with a confession. Okay? Is it okay if I make a confession? All right. It's just between us, right? And all those people who may watch on the video sometime down the road. So my confession goes like this. I am not a wildly creative person, okay? I'm just not. And I suppose that's why I'm a finance manager. If I was really creative, maybe I would have been an artist. Artists can get great rewards for their creativity. What happens to finance managers who are creative? You might have to go see our friend Cristi, the former speaker, right? Yeah. Sometimes maybe it's good when finance managers aren't so creative. But all joking aside, I'm just not naturally an especially creative person. And when I began to understand these principles on leadership, I was concerned because I saw this concept of envisioning, and I thought to myself, you know what? I'm not so creative, and I think that's an aspect of leadership that I'm going to struggle with. I thought that would be a big challenge for me. But I began to understand over the course of my career, I began to understand the power of not just creativity, but reapplication. And it's the idea of look outside of your industry to see what's going on. Look inside your industry to see what you might be able to reapply. Look in the world of technology or other arenas and bring those ideas from various places together and find a way to apply those into the context in which you work. So hopefully what I just said sounded really familiar to you, because that's exactly what Steve Jobs said in that quote, right? So literally the leader, former leader of one of the most innovative countries the world has ever known is telling us it's not like brilliant creative insights necessarily. It's this idea of keeping the external focus, understand what's going on out there, and bring some of those ideas together in a unique way to create a vision for where you are. So I come with good news for any of you who, like me, are not especially creative. If there's any of you out there, the good news is that you can still be an outstanding visionary using the approach that I mentioned. All right, next is the last point related to the vision is be sure to involve other people in developing that vision. So let's create a scenario here where I'm the boss again. Don't you love it how I appoint myself the boss in these examples? So I'm the boss, and let's say you're the team. We're all working together, but I'm the leader, okay? And we're getting ready to start a new fiscal year. And so it's time to update our vision for the future, okay? So you guys wait right here, and I'm going to step into another room for a while, and I'm going to develop the vision, okay? And so I go do that, and I come back, and I say, hi, group. I'm back, and I'm back to present our vision for next year. What do you think? Yeah. Where did the "our" part of that come from, right? That sounds a lot like my vision. So obviously from that, I'm leading to the point of buy-in. If you really want people to be signing up for the vision, they need to have a stake in that vision. They need to understand what role they have in that. So that's one aspect. What's the other one? What's the other benefit of having input into the vision? It's better. It's a better vision, right? It's always going to be a better vision if you get those different points of view involved in it. Good. Exactly. They'll be able to see, when people can see their input in the vision. You have to be careful to make sure your vision doesn't become a combination of all kinds of stuff in order to make everyone happy. But to the extent that people can be involved in developing it, it will be better, and people will be supportive of that vision, much more supportive. Okay, so remember our second of these 5 actions is engaging others. So can you name leaders who are especially good at building relationships and collaborating? Sometimes this doesn't happen as visibly as envisioning, but can you think of any examples? Bill Gates, good. Donald Trump, yeah. Yeah, Zuckerberg. Yeah, for sure. Good. Here's one from way back when, Sam Walton. Do you know who Sam Walton is? The founder of the Walmart chain. So, do you guys have Walmart stores here? No? Okay. Well, good for you. We have so many, we can send you some if you'd like. No, they're good stores, but they are everywhere in the U.S. So Sam Walton was the founder of Walmart years ago, and back when the chain had only 750 stores, Sam Walton, during the course of 1 year, actually visited every one of those stores to engage the people who were the store leaders. And when people would ask him the question, you are the CEO. Shouldn't you be off working on strategy somewhere or something else that's CEO-like? His response was, do you think that the people at those stores know that I know them and that I care about them? And the answer is, you bet, because he was there. And part of what I want you to understand here is, remember we talked about leadership character and its importance. Well, recognize that you may be the world's #1 absolute best at leadership character. I mean, you may be the peak of integrity. And if people don't know that because you've reached out and engaged them, then it is worth nothing, right? And you really need to engage them so that they can learn to trust you and learn about the character that you have. And here was a leader who understood that well. Next is Abraham Lincoln. We're continuing our tour of American presidents. And Lincoln said, "If you desire to win a man to your cause, first convince him you are his sincere friend. After this, you will have little trouble convincing him of the justness of your cause." You'll notice I underlined a word there. What is it? Yeah, that's an important word. Because this is not, this concept that we're talking about really is collaboration, not manipulation, right? This isn't engage people so you can get them to do what you want them to do. So sincere friendship is what we're talking about here, sincere engagement. And Margaret Thatcher had an important quote as well. "It pays to know the enemy, not least because at some time you may have an opportunity to turn him into a friend." So I'd like to build on that just by saying, as you engage people, it's really easy to go engage people that are our friends, people that think like we do. We know they'll like our ideas, right? But I encourage you to reach out to people who think differently than you do. Maybe people who aren't your friends, but at least people who may be your friends who think very differently. That will help you to improve some of the ideas. So the collaborator, we'll go through this one quickly. They build strong relationships based on trust. They listen, and they listen to diverse opinions, as I said. They communicate openly and clearly. And by the way, when leaders communicate openly and clearly, what happens is they are role modeling what communication should look like in their organization. So usually that tone begins to permeate the organization. The whole organization starts to communicate that way. And then lastly is the concept of remembering to create those win-win situations. So in order to avoid a manipulation environment, you want to make sure that as you're working with people that there's some mutual benefit involved in that. That's a big motivator to those that you'll be working with. All right, one more for now, and that is adding capability. So let me just share with you a couple of examples of people who are really strong at this idea of equipping or enabling or building capability. You might not often think of Martin Luther King in this context, but King had this to say: "Our success can be measured by how well we shape, grow, and assure the success of the next generation." So he got it. He knew that it wasn't all about winning today. That might be winning the battle. But if you want to win the war, you need to make sure that you're really set up for success over the long term by having that next generation prepared. And my old friend Theodore Roosevelt, speaking very much in a character that is his uniquely, he said, "Whenever you are asked if you can do a job, say, 'Certainly I can.' Then get busy and figure out how to do it." So Roosevelt was one who had a great understanding of the importance of building capability, and he also had a great positive approach to that. The equipper, the person who does the enabling. One point I want to emphasize here is that it's easy when you're a leader to think about enabling an organization. You're building into others to prepare them for the task. But don't forget all along the way the importance of making sure you yourself, as the leader, continue to be sharpened and made more capable to lead in the future. Sometimes I've seen leaders who have taken their eye off that ball, and it's easy to get stale. So keep the focus on growing yourself as well. Put people in positions to do their best. I'll give you a simple example that you can probably all relate to here. How many of you, we've all been on some form of team, right? All been on some type of team. How many of you have been on the team and you have your first meeting and the leader of the team says, "Okay, we need somebody to take care of a certain task. Who is willing to do this?" And somebody will raise their hand and they'll say, "Oh, I've never done that before. I'll do that." And so he says, "Okay, got it. We'll have your name down. Who is willing to do this task?" And somebody says, "Well, Mary's not here. Let's have Mary do it." Right? That's one of my personal favorites. Find somebody who's not there. And at the very end, we say, well, we only have one more task, and we have one more person, so this one's for you, right? So what happens when you assign work out in that way? I mean, we've all seen that, right? Haven't we? I mean, I've seen that more times. I've done that more times than I want to admit. But think about when you're really trying to make sure that those who are following you have the capability they need, put them in a position where they do their best. If you were a basketball coach, you would make sure that you had your shooters shooting and your rebounders rebounding. You wouldn't switch their positions. No coach would do that. But somehow we go right into that meeting and use that same approach of somewhat randomly assigning out some of the work. So the point here is partly our job as leaders is to build capability of individuals, but it's partly to build the capability of the whole, right? And the best way to do that is to get people where they do it best. Okay, break barriers to help others. I just wanted to point out here that there's another aspect to building, another aspect to enabling, I'll say. It's partly about building someone up and training them. We've talked about that a lot. But the other aspect of it is breaking barriers that stand in the way of people. I like to use the illustration of my time in Vidin. If I wanted to drive my car in the wintertime in Vidin, it snows quite a bit there. And if I want to drive my car, part of enabling that car is to put gas in the tank, right? Car's not going anywhere without gas in the tank. That's kind of like training. Let's kind of fill them up with what they need to know. But if that snow is this high on the road, that car's not going anywhere, no matter how full the gas tank is. What do you need? You need a snowplow to go ahead of it to really clear the path. Sometimes, as a leader, you need to be the snowplow. You really need to clear the path, break through the barriers. That might look like making an important decision that would otherwise cause people to be in a swirl and not make progress. It might be you need to go talk to another department leader at your level and work through an issue rather than asking your organization to fight against it at a different level. And then lastly, creating a healthy culture. Once again, enabling, this reinforces the point I made. Enabling is not just about individuals, it really is about an organization's culture. So set the expectations on culture and role model it personally and demand it from those who are following you. Okay? So with that, the next topic is the topic of inspiring, which I can tell as I look around the room right now at your faces in this warm, dark room. There's some serious inspiration that's needed before we can have a really productive discussion on the topic of inspiration. So I'm going to stop right now. I think we have, do we have another speaker who's coming at the moment, or are we going to move right into a break? We have another speaker? Okay. So I'll sign off for a moment, and Steve and I will be back shortly. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Todd.